They made her eat last, not by rule, not by schedule, but by silence. Every lunch period, every day, Isabella waited at the end of the line while the others cut ahead, whispered, smirked. She never said a word. She just held her tray and kept her eyes low. At 12 years old, she already knew the price of speaking with an accent. On this particular Thursday, she sat alone, same corner table, under the humming soda machine. Plastic fork. Half a sandwich, no milk. No one sat beside her, no one ever did, until a shadow stretched across the table, boots, long coat, a man too old for the school, too quiet to be a teacher, and beside him a dog, big, still, watching. He didn't say hello, he just pulled out the bench and sat. The cafeteria went silent. A girl who'd never been seen now sat beside a man no one dared to ignore, and everything changed. Thank you for being here. Sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now, let's take a closer look at what really happened. Her name was Isabella Ruiz, 12 years old. Born in El Paso, raised in too many towns to count. This one, Oak Hollow, was supposed to be the last. Her mother believed in fresh starts. Her father believed in holding on to what mattered. And Isabella. She had learned quietly to expect nothing from anyone she didn't know, because kindness in new schools always came with a timer. She was the kind of kid adults liked on paper, polite, straight-backed, never late, fluent in 2 languages. Loved science, loved the stars, but to other kids she was invisible, and when she wasn't invisible, she was confusing. Her voice was part of the problem, not the content, the cadence, the way she said certain vowels, the way her th sounded soft, the way she sometimes whispered pardon before excuse me. It marked her as other, and in 6th grade. You don't need more than that. The cafeteria showed it best. Each day at 8 p.m., the line to the hot lunch wrapped in uneven waves. Friend groups formed organically, like oil in water, and Isabella stood at the end. Not because of any rule, but because every time she tried to move forward, someone would accidentally bump into her, or drop something, or whisper NASA girl just loud enough to be heard. So she waited, and when it was her turn, she took what was left. She didn't complain, didn't look up, because she knew being quiet meant surviving. The nickname had stuck, NASA girl. It had started 2 weeks earlier in room 208. Mrs. Kendrick, her homeroom teacher, had asked a simple question. What do your parents do? Isabella had answered proudly, clear voice, no hesitation. My dad used to work for NASA. He built parts for the Europa probe. Half the class laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the way she said it, too direct, too confident, too unbelievable for someone who looked like her. Mrs. Kendrick hadn't helped. She raised an eyebrow, then smiled in that tight-lipped way adults use when they don't want to scold but want to shame. Isabella, honey, let's try to keep things realistic. That was the moment. It wasn't the kids who broke her. It was the grown-up who didn't believe her. Because if a teacher didn't think your father could have worked for NASA, what chance did the rest of the school have? From that day on, Isabella spoke less. She ate lunch alone. She didn't raise her hand. And she never mentioned her father again, even when he showed her engine diagrams at night or brought home old mission patches she could hold like badges. Her dad noticed, of course. Did you tell them about Europa? He asked one evening. She shrugged. They don't care. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, they cared enough to doubt it, which somehow felt worse than being ignored. The lunch aide, Mrs. Dory, had seen it all. But she'd seen too many kids come and go. She didn't interfere unless there were spills or fists. She's quiet, she told the front office one day. She eats, she reads, she's not a problem. But what no one saw was the slow way Isabella's spirit curled inward. How her tray grew emptier, not because she ate more, but because she took less. How she folded her paper napkin 12 times every day, the same number. The same rhythm, like a silent defense. And then came Thursday, cold for March, wind skimming the tops of yellow grass. The kind of day when the sky looks too big for a small town like Oak Hollow. Elijah Boone had only stopped in for an errand. A fellow veteran from his unit, now retired and half-blind, had asked Elijah to deliver a folder to a middle school science teacher in the area. Inside the folder, schematics for a propulsion system from the early 90s. Maybe they'll use it for something, the vet had said. Or maybe some girl out there just needs to see her father's hands in those wires. Elijah didn't ask what he meant. He just drove. Scout rode beside him, head resting on the console, tongue tucked behind quiet teeth. Alert. Calm. They pulled into the school parking lot just before noon. Elijah hadn't planned to enter the cafeteria, but as he stood at the front office, waiting for someone to sign for the folder, Scout tensed. Not a growl, not a bark, just a quiet shift in posture, eyes fixed on a hallway to the left, head lowered. Then he turned slowly toward a set of double doors with porthole windows. Elijah followed his gaze. Through the glass he saw a cafeteria buzzing with noise, laughter, movement, lines of children, and in the far corner, a girl small still. Alone, she wasn't eating, just staring at her tray, hands folded, feet swinging slightly. And no one looking her way, except Scout. And now Elijah, he didn't ask permission, didn't hesitate, he just opened the door. And walked in. Elijah didn't say a word, not when he entered, not when the cafeteria turned to stare. He just walked calm, steady toward the corner table. Scout followed in perfect sync, not wagging, not sniffing, just present. And when Elijah reached the table where Isabella sat, he paused for just half a second, then pulled the bench and sat down. Isabella froze, not in fear, in uncertainty. No one ever joined her table. No one had ever looked at her tray without condescension or pity. But this man, he didn't look at her, he looked with her, out into the room, at the noise, at the silence between her and the others. And then, at Scout, who sat down without command, right beside her foot, and let out a breath, like he'd found what he was looking for. "You gonna eat that chicken while it's still warm?" Elijah said softly. Isabella blinked. It wasn't the question. It was the tone, like he wasn't asking out of concern, but because somehow he already knew she was hungry. She nodded slowly, then took a bite, small, careful. Elijah unwrapped a sandwich from his coat, tore a piece off, laid it on a napkin for Scout. No further words, just routine. Across the room, whispers started. "Who is he?" "That's her uncle." "No, that's her lawyer." "I think he's a cop." But none of them mattered, because the loudest voice was the one that didn't speak. In the front office, the vice principal stood half out of his seat. "There's a man in the cafeteria," the lunch monitor said. "He's with a student, with a dog." The VP rubbed his eyes. "Is he dangerous?" "No," she said, slower this time. "He's calm, the dog too, like military trained or something." That got his attention. He radioed down to the principal. "You better come see this yourself." Meanwhile, in room 208, Mrs. Kendrick closed her laptop. She was preparing Friday's Citizen of the Week presentation. Isabella wasn't on the list, was never on the list. The girl was too quiet, too strange, and worst of all, too proud. That comment about NASA still annoyed her. No sixth grader should speak like they've done something special. She looked up as the classroom door opened. A whisper from the aide. "There's a man sitting with your student in the cafeteria. Older, tall, with a German shepherd." Kendrick rolled her eyes. "Of course. Always the dramatic ones," she muttered. Back in the cafeteria, Elijah leaned forward slightly. "Scout doesn't sit next to everyone," he said. Isabella looked down. The dog was resting his chin on her shoe, completely still. "He can tell who needs protecting." She didn't know what to say, so she whispered, barely audible, "Why me?" Elijah didn't smile, didn't offer comfort, just said, "Because you're not lying and because no one else sees that." The cafeteria doors swung open again. This time it was the principal, Mr. Langford, early 50s, polished. Wore ties with little rockets on them, a former science teacher who still loved model engines. He spotted Elijah immediately and stopped walking. There was something about the man, something that didn't fit the mold of visitor. He had presence, not in the loud way, but in the way trees make shade even when you're not looking for it. Langford approached carefully. Elijah Boone. Elijah nodded once. The principal offered a hand. Commander Monroe said you'd be coming. We weren't expecting you during lunch. Elijah cut him off gently. Didn't expect to stay, but then Scout walked me in. Langford glanced down at the dog. The dog stared back. Langford didn't press further. Instead, he looked at Isabella. You okay, Miss Ruiz? She nodded, then looked up, met his eyes, and asked, Do you believe my dad worked for NASA? The cafeteria stilled. Langford inhaled slowly and said with no hesitation, I believe we've forgotten how many people made space possible and how few of their names we bothered to remember. Later that day, Elijah delivered the folder to room 208. Mrs. Kendrick opened the door, frowned slightly. I wasn't told you'd be delivering it personally. Elijah didn't flinch. He handed her the folder, from Ellis Monroe. Her eyes widened. You served with him. Elijah tilted his head. He remembers you. Said you had strong opinions back then, too. She flushed, defensive. I never meant to discourage the girl. She made an unlikely claim. No, Elijah said, voice even. You assumed a story based on the voice that told it. He leaned forward. I've buried men who built the rockets you teach about. They didn't wear suits. They didn't speak perfect English, but they showed up and never asked for permission to belong. She didn't cry in the cafeteria, or in the hallway, or even when Mrs. Kendrick looked away in guilt for the first time. Isabella waited until school let out, until the buses left, until the sidewalks emptied. Then she walked behind the gym, to where the dumpsters sat in a patch of afternoon shade, where no one would see, and there finally she sat and folded. Scout found her first. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He simply rounded the corner, stopped, and lay down slowly with his head tilted to the side. His ears twitched, but he didn't move closer, not yet. Isabella had her knees pulled in, arms wrapped tight, not shaking, not sobbing, just still, like she was trying to disappear from the inside out. When Elijah appeared, slow boots on gravel, she didn't look up. He sat down a few feet away, waited. Minutes passed. Then she said quietly, I didn't lie. Elijah nodded. I know. They act like I don't belong. They're wrong. They laughed in my face. I've been there. Pause. Then she looked up, her voice shaking for the first time. Have you ever had someone tell you you're too small to matter? Elijah breathed in, then let out the memory. I was 19, he began. First deployment, middle of nowhere, jungle so thick you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. I had a job, just a radio op, nothing fancy. But I'd memorized every call sign, every ridge, every trail name. And I still remember one night we got separated. Me and a kid from Queens, barely 17. He was scared, shaking, didn't know left from north, and I froze. I was supposed to guide him back. I had the map. I had the signal. But I was so scared of being wrong, of leading us into fire, that I said nothing, stayed still. We hid all night. By morning help came. But he never trusted me again, and I never forgot that silence. Elijah looked away. That boy didn't die, but something between us did, and I've spent the rest of my life trying to speak up when it matters, even if no one listens. He turned to her. You matter, Isabella, and I'm not gonna stay silent this time. She stared at him. The words didn't heal everything, but they cracked something open, just enough. Scout finally rose, took 3 steps forward, and rested his head in her lap. She let out a sound, half breath, half sob, then placed her hand slowly, gently on his fur, and didn't let go. That night Elijah wrote a letter, longhand, careful script, addressed to Commander Ellis Monroe. He included a photo Isabella had drawn, a pencil sketch of Europa, labeled with propulsion specs in the margins. He didn't ask for a favor, didn't ask for action. He simply wrote, Thought you'd want to see what happens when the silence ends. The next morning Isabella opened her locker. Inside, an envelope, official NASA letterhead, stamped, signed, a certificate. Carlos Ruiz, propulsion technician, Europa IV probe, confirmed NASA subcontractor. Attached, a handwritten post-it. She wasn't lying, neither was he. M. And next to that, a small patch, Europa mission crest. Her father's name stitched in gold thread. She held it like a medal, and for the first time in weeks, stood a little taller. That Friday in the cafeteria, things shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but visibly. A few kids sat a table closer. No one cut in front of her in line, and Mrs. Kendrick for once looked away first when their eyes met. Scout sat again by the soda machine, still, watching, but not guarding anymore. Just witnessing. The science fair wasn't crowded. It never was. A few parents wandered. Some kids stood nervously by their projects, reciting memorized facts about photosynthesis or circuits. But at the far end of the gym stood Isabella. No frills, no blinking lights. Just one display board, How We Got to Europa, and beneath that title, photos, drawings, handwritten equations. A small model made from salvaged parts, and in the bottom right corner, a photo of her father, smiling, grease on his cheek. Next to it, a NASA patch, stitched with the name Carlos Ruiz. And beneath that, he didn't wear a suit, but he helped touch the stars. People stopped, not many, but enough. A veteran from town paused for 10 full minutes, whispering something about liquid oxygen mixing ratios. A school board member asked for her father's full name, wanted to look into it. And the principal, Mr. Langford, pinned a ribbon quietly to the top of her board. Independent research, first place. Isabella didn't smile. Not right away, but her shoulders relaxed. And when someone asked, "Did your dad really work on this?" she didn't hesitate, she said, "Yes, he did." Outside, Scout waited, not by the door, but by the flagpole. Elijah sat on a nearby bench, coat open, watching the late spring clouds drift. He wasn't checking a watch. He never rushed Scout, because Scout always knew when the story was over. And today, Scout stood not urgently, but deliberately. He turned his head once toward the doors, toward Isabella, then back to Elijah, and walked. Inside, Isabella found one last note in her backpack. No envelope, just folded paper, same sharp handwriting. Boone's Rule 7, the people who remember you are often the ones you don't see coming. She read it twice, and for the first time, she looked up, not to see who was watching, but to see who was missing, and smiled. Not every rescue comes in a uniform. Not every truth needs shouting. Sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to look away, and one dog who knows where he's needed, because belonging doesn't always come with permission. Sometimes it comes when someone finally sits beside you and stays. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Who was the one person that saw you when no one else did? And if you believe in standing up for the quiet ones, the overlooked, the underestimated, you're already part of this story. Subscribe to join us for more quiet moments that matter. Elijah and Scout will meet you there.